Welcome back to Sow, Grow and Cook. It's the end of June. The sun is shining. It was raining all yesterday. We're starting to get some moisture, but it's still pretty dry out here. The ground still has cracks in it, but things are improving and we're set to have more rain next week. Now, let's take a look at this little bit of meadow that we don't mow. When we first moved to this property, there's Stella having a good roll around in the grass. That's right, you have a really good itch there, good scratch. Anyway, when we first moved here, this used to be kept mown quite short by the previous owners. And we did that initially, and then we decided, no, let's not mow it. Let's just mow a few paths up to the entrance of the next part of the field, and another one around to where the chicken pens are, so that it's easy to walk after the rain and we don't get your trousers wet, etc. So we let the other bits of grass grow, and we now have this really luscious little meadow with lots of different flowers growing. We've got things like buttercups and different types of clovers, and something that looks like wild carrot or Queen Anne's lace, but it's probably something else altogether. We've got something here that hasn't blossomed yet. It's called knapweed, and it looks a bit like little thistle flowers, but there's no thorns, and the butterflies love the flowers. But when the flowers dry and go to seed, the goldfinch birds, flocks of them, come in here and they feed on the seeds. So it's a real wildlife friendly flower. There's some other yellow flowers which I think are related to the pea family. These little ones here, type of legume. And we have something called self-heal. Now, let me find it. Looks a little bit like clover, but it's not. It's a different color. Here it is. Beautiful little purple flowers. And lots of different types of grass as well. This stuff here, now, this is yellow rattle that's gone to seed. Now, yellow rattle is something you might, in the UK, certainly get in a wildflower seed mix. Now, we don't let the goats in this bit because they would make a beeline for the apple trees and the fruit trees, and they would eat the branches and they would probably strip the bark as well. But I'll show you where we do let them go. We've got some little wild areas at the back of the orchard and behind the compost heaps, just at the back side of our hedgerow, or one of our hedgerows. It's full of docks and nettles and willow and brambles and hawthorn, all the sorts of things that goats really enjoy having a munch on, because at the end of the day they are browsers mainly, first and foremost. They will eat grass, but they love having a go at shrubs and leaves and things of trees and shrubs and bushes. Before we head off to the vegetable patch, here's a nice little view of Stella communing with the sheep. And look, they've all had haircuts, so they're keeping cool in this hot weather. Off we go to the veg patch. And here's my polyculture bed. It's got quite a few things that I intentionally planted and a few extras that self-seeded themselves. So this started off as a new raised bed last autumn in the space where we had some compost bins which were falling apart, and I planted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 small blueberry bushes, because this is eventually going to be a blueberry bush bed. But I thought the soil was so nice, and there's still so much space, and these blueberry bushes are still quite young, that I thought rather than waste all that space, I'd plant some other things. So I added some Swiss chard, which is coming up nicely, some celery, some more celery, and some lettuce. Lots of lovely different coloured lettuce, and some things like zinnias and calendula and snapdragons, which are going to be blooming soon. A few little kale plants and leeks dotted here and there, and things that I didn't plant but have come up on their own is, what is this? Dill. I've got some dill, self-seeded dill. Now this is an interesting one. It's a self-seeded tomatillo, because I planted some tomatillos a couple of years ago and had so many that my freezer has bags of it still from a couple of years ago, and they're lovely, but I didn't feel I needed to plant anymore. But obviously some seeds ended up in our homemade compost, and as it's been a warm summer so far here, they've come up, because they're quite heat-loving plants. But they've come up, and I'm going to leave them and see if they fruit. It'll be a bit of a fun experiment. And apart from the dill and the tomatillo, there's some sort of chamomile type plant that I also didn't plant, but I'm going to leave because it's pretty and it smells nice. And anything else? Oh yeah, some red auric. Okay, that came up on its own. And I always find these self-seeded plants a bit of a bonus. It's kind of fun. They want to grow. So they're growing with no effort and no input from me. So they either live or they die, and it looks like they're thriving, to be honest. Oh, there's some comfrey as well. I didn't plant that. Or is that a foxglove? It might be a foxglove. I'm not 100% sure, because the sort of comfrey I've got is sterile. It doesn't throw seed down, so it's probably more of a foxglove, which has similar looking leaves. I'll keep an eye out and let you know. And here's the winter squash bed. And this end is where I did the little hugelkultur experiment. So the plants are growing on this bit of the bed, are growing very near where I put all that rotten wood and straw and all sorts of things in there, sticks and wood chip. And they seem to be doing really, really well. So I would call that a successful hugelkultur experiment. Now this side has just got compost and manure from our different sources here on the small holding. They're doing well as well. And I've got different varieties. I've got uchiki curry, I've got priest's hat, I've got Hubbard, and I think I've got sweet dumpling and possibly a spaghetti squash in here. So hopefully these are going to continue to grow really, really well and bless us with a lot of fruit that I can store successfully over the winter. And do you remember that arch I was making for the beans earlier in the season, made out of hazel and willow poles? Well, this is how it's turning out so far, and the beans are growing really well. I really like it. I think it looks quite rustic, even though it's pretty higgledy-piggledy. Look at that branch sticking out. But the runner beans absolutely love it. And inside the top polytunnel, I've got my Minnesota midget melons in the front. I saved the seeds from last year's crop, and they're thriving up here. Um, they haven't started to climb up yet, but they're just about getting ready. And I've grown them in a big water tank. I think they're happy in there. And down this central raised bed is this year's tomato plants, or tomato plants, depending on where you come from. I've got 34 plants. There's lots of different varieties. I've done my usual Crimson Crush and Ukrainian Purple, as well as banana legs, shimmer, rosella, red pear, and a few others. And they seem to be happy. I'm growing them up, baling twine like I usually do. So I'm going to be planting a few leeks, baby leeks, in a little area inside the polytunnel that has a few gaps. I've got a few little tiny kale plants and a few little dwarf beans and some basil and lettuce that is finishing off. And I thought I'd use the space for the leeks, little clusters of maybe 3 or 4, just a few, and these can winter over in the polytunnel. It gets cold in the polytunnel in the winter, but it is sheltered from the wind and the rain. So, you know, it just kind of gives you a few more options for veg if the weather turns really, really nasty. I mean, leeks are pretty hardy outdoors. They're the one thing that didn't get too bothered during last year's really frozen weather in December. Nonetheless, if they do that little bit better in the polytunnel, and I've got the space, why not put a few in? So basically, I'll do a cluster, as I said, of 2 or 3. Make a little hole with my dipper and just put the leek in. Some people don't bother filling it in, they just water them in and let the soil fall in. I always press the soil around it. Never had any problems doing it that way. So that's it for today's tour. I hope you enjoyed that, and let me know in the comment section below how your gardens are all growing. How's the weather affected their rate of growth? Have you had a lot of dry weather or a lot of wet weather, or hot, too cold? Let me know. Once again, thank you for watching. So Grow and Cook. Bye for now.